All right. All right. Hi, everyone. I'll just make sure if somebody can confirm that you can hear me talking right now.
We can hear you, sir.
Awesome. Thank you.
How's the honking downtown still?
Well, it's definitely quieted down a lot since the weekend. We could hear a lot more over the weekend. I feel bad for the people in Centertown. It seems that more people show up on the weekends.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess if you've been following the news, you know that for the first time in Canadian history, the Emergencies Act has been enacted.
Yeah, I've been following it. So yeah, I know about the act. It was it Monday? It was yesterday or the day on Sunday? I'm not too sure.
Yesterday, I believe, is when the news. There were kind of rumblings of this over the weekend. You know, late night, early morning cabinet meetings and first ministers meetings and whatnot. And then the news broke yesterday, which frankly, I think it's very interesting because it's kind of a historical moment. But I also think it's going to be interesting to see the discussion around this play out in the public sphere. And I'm not including the tinfoil hat people, of course. There's a lot of misinformation on their part going around about what this bill actually entails. What has happened is that a public order emergency has been declared, which means that some level of government below the federal, municipal, provincial, in this case, I would say both, is unable to deal with an issue to do with public order. This, of course, is the occupation here downtown and the blockades that have been going on at federal borders like the Ambassador Bridge. And I think everybody should probably watch the Prime Minister's address that was given yesterday if you're really interested in the details of this. The Emergencies Act is a lot more limited than the act that it supersedes, which was the War Measures Act. It's designed so that it's actually quite difficult for any abuse of power to happen. I have heard some discussion from law professors and whatnot about the sort of precedent that using it sets. And that's what I think is going to be interesting to see play out, is that discussion. That said, at the moment, I do think that it was probably what needed to happen. And again, as Justin Trudeau made clear, I mean, this is not being used to curtail civil liberties, and this is not being used to bring in military personnel. It's mostly being used to go after the financing of these organizations, which are not organizations, but going after the organizations and individuals that have financed this convoy, which, if you've been paying attention to the story, a lot of this money is coming from the United States, right? And yeah, it's kind of like the Wild West out there. Yeah, a lot of American money, as Holden says in the chat, and some from overseas, some large donations from quite wealthy individuals. And an interesting thing that I read about yesterday was that the names of the donor list from the Give Send Go fundraising campaign which was the one that replaced the GoFundMe one, because those funds were frozen and then refunded because of a violation of the terms of service. That list of donors has been leaked. I guess we have some kind of hackers to thank for that. So it's all very interesting. Yeah, that's right. Some white hat hacker guy, I guess. I don't know who it was. Doesn't sound like it was anonymous or those guys or anything, but maybe it was. Who knows? I don't know much about hackers. But the list is out there now. And what the application of the Emergencies Act actually does here is it means that websites like GiveSendGo, GoFundMe have to report to FinTrack, which is a sort of system that we have in place to ensure that no money laundering is happening, that nothing is funding anything illegal. So now that they just have to report, and banks have the power to freeze suspicious accounts too. And it kind of sucks for the people that kind of got roped into this. I mean, I know there are some people, I don't get it, but there are some people who I guess actually believe the stuff that their social media algorithms have been showing them, to the effect that scientifically it is a good idea to end all the mandates and all that stuff. It's not yet, soon, but not yet. That whose lives could be ruined by this, right? Yeah, some more questions in the chat. Yeah, like Zach says, yeah, you've summed it up. Yeah, I think you've summed it up quite well there. Yeah. If an institution doesn't cooperate, I mean, the institutions like the banks will cooperate because they're all chartered by the government of Canada, right? They can only be banks because we let them be banks. But other companies, like maybe there's a trucking company, and maybe some of their rigs were parked downtown, for example. Those could now be seized. Their corporate accounts could be frozen. Somebody like GiveSendGo or GoFundMe has some money, some donations they've collected. Well, they send that that has to be dispersed through a bank, and the bank will not disperse that while the funds are under investigation, that kind of thing, right? Why isn't it time to lift the mandates? Well, keep in mind, I'm not that kind of doctor. I'll speak to what's going on in different places in the world versus here first, and then we'll look at specifically what's in Canada. A lot of the talk I hear from people on the side of lifting the mandates now are pointing to countries like Denmark or Sweden, which are now lifting their mandates. I think that there is a much more reasonable expectation that people might be acting in good faith with respect to the easing of these mandates in those countries. They don't seem to have the misinformation problem that we've had in North America, nor the interference from the alt-right in propagating that misinformation. We're all in a different spot. I mean, we all kind of went through the Omicron wave. We were all riding it at different points, right? And so yeah, like Thomas said here, if you mean end the mandates, then start lifting mandates incrementally, then sure, as long as that's based on the science. yeah, maybe it's time to slowly start lifting them, but doing so all at once. Yeah, and that's my concern. Is that Doug Ford, for example, also was on the television. Was on the television the other day, talking about when some of the mandates will be lifted in Ontario. So we're going to see the passport system gone. And then later we'll begin lifting mask mandates, right? So the worry is that we're talking about doing that now when we still have an average of 1,500 cases a day. Before this wave, we still had those restrictions in place, and we were at about half that before the Omicron wave really hit. That's the worry. But Jonah, I think you put it well there. Yeah, Thomas and Jonah, that's good. Zach makes a good point. The country's lifting mandates are either far enough left to do it intelligently, or they're far enough right that they're uncaring of potential risks. Yeah, so I think if you compare, Denmark's response to, say, the state of Florida, you see that difference. And Jonah's right, being reactive versus being reactionary is a difference we see. So it's not like, come on, we're all sick of this. We're all sick of this, right? We're all tired of it. But we need to do this the right way. Anyway, I think it's very interesting, and I think we should all keep an eye on yeah, Jonah, again, that's right. Yeah. Have they completely fulfilled their purpose yet? Well, vaccination rates are pretty high in Canada. There are holdouts, like there are anti-vaxxer holdouts. Are we going to reach those people? Maybe not. Probably not. If they're really, if you're talking about the kind of anti-vax person that believes what they believe based on, say, misinformation, you're not going to reach somebody like that. So maybe it would be better to focus on vaccine equity around the world, right? And maybe get more shots to countries that don't have our vaccination rate, so that we don't see new variants, right? Yeah, like Ian says, if they haven't got it yet, they're not going to get it now. So, okay, so we've got some people, we've got like 5 to 10% who are like vehemently holding out against it. Okay, we're not going to reach them. Let's give those vaccines to somebody in a country that wants to get vaccinated. And so for that reason, maybe there's an argument there that it's time to end the passport system. I don't know. I personally don't know. I kind of liked knowing that if I was going out somewhere, going to the movies or wherever, that people around me were vaccinated, and maybe the current QR code thing will end at some point or another, but the passport isn't going away. COVID-19 vaccines are going to be on people's immunization records. Like, as we go on into the future, I think that, just like how when I was young, when I was a child, we didn't have a chickenpox vaccine, right? If you wanted to, if you got chickenpox, you just got chickenpox. And the conventional wisdom when I was young, when I was a kid, way back in the 90s, was that if you are going to get chickenpox, it's better to get it when you're younger, because when it's older, it's not fun. And I got it when I was a little older than, for example, my little sister, who breezed through the chickenpox, and I was sick for like 2 weeks. It was terrible. Nowadays, of course, there's a vaccine for the chickenpox, and if you want to send your kids to public school in Canada, you have to have them vaccinated. That's probably going to be the case with the COVID vaccines, especially if we ever develop, say, like a universal coronavirus vaccine. That is what I would expect to happen. So even if we get rid of the little QR code things, they are going to still be vaccinating. It's still going to be on people's immunization records. So Well, yeah, a lot of, I mean, already, a lot of vaccines are required that you don't even think of. I don't remember the exact list right now, but yeah, right now, if you want to send your kids to elementary school, it's measles, it's so it's measles, mumps, rubella, it's chicken pox, tetanus, TB, polio, like, yeah, or it could be like that. It could be like that. Maybe we'd have a yearly COVID vaccine, like an annual COVID vaccine, which fine, you know. I mean, look, I had it in April. I was sick with COVID in April. And I was I'm not I'm not the model of health, but I'm not unhealthy. And this thing knocked me on my butt for 3 weeks, right? I wasn't hospitalized, but my girlfriend and I both had it, and we were down for the count for like 3 weeks. So tired, couldn't even watch a television show, right? Everything was just crappy and exhausting. So yeah, I mean, if I had to get like a yearly shot so that I don't get that sick again, I think I'm okay with that. You know? Yeah, and that's a good point, Emily. So look at all these concerns about technology and medicine and politics that intersect with this weird situation we've been in for 2.5 years. It's crazy, right? Very crazy. But yeah, keep an eye on the news because some interesting developments are happening. This is a historical moment. I mean, think about it. This is a historical moment, and Ottawa's kind of an interesting place to be in. I mean, yeah, it's not as exciting as some cities, Whenever that's what I hear about whenever I go to Toronto, right? Oh, you're from Ottawa. Oh, Ottawa's boring. Yeah. So that's well, maybe it is most of the time, but not right now. When stuff like this happens, it's pretty interesting to be here. So definitely keep your eyes on the news. And think about what we're learning in this class about technology and philosophy. How does it all apply to the world that we're in now, right? So I don't think we're going to get through the rest of the chapter today. I don't have enough slides prepared for that. This chapter, it's a dry one. I'm sorry. It is a dry one. But we're going to try and make our way through as much more of it as we can today and try and finish it off for next time. And then it's reading week. So that's going to be great. Reading week. I'm very much looking forward to reading week. I also have some news. If you might have seen this when you clicked on the Zoom link in the description. Yes, Caitlin, that's right. That's what I was just about to say. I'm going to give a small extension. I've already given it. So small extension. So Monday is when this will be due. And that's because I'm not going as fast as I want to on the grading. Liam's doing a great job. He's blazing ahead of me on all the grading that he has to do. I am slower. I need to catch up. And I want you to be able to read our feedback before you submit your next response. So, yes, blessed be the fruit. We're gonna do that. And it's reading week. Like even if something comes up, like maybe we get another weekend where there's some weirdness happening in town. Some weirdness happening in town. Maybe there's an influx of protesters, and we don't know what'll happen. I mean, guys, okay, like at the border of Alberta, they seized a vehicle after someone had tried to hit an RCMP officer with their vehicle. They seized a vehicle that had all kinds of guns and stuff in it. So, I'm not fear mongering, but like, maybe something will happen over the weekend that stresses you out a little bit and you need to have an extra couple of days. Talk to me. Let me know. It's fine. We've got COVID. We've got this weird protest occupation thing. Look after your mental health, okay, is what I'm saying. Yeah, Julian. Yeah, I saw that. I was like, this is like This is like American militia stuff. This is like, what? Come on. I thought this was Canada. Yeah. Yeah, I saw that too. A truck with guns was stolen. I'm still not super into the details on that story. This class is turning out to be like a discussion of the news, but that's okay. Yeah, 2,000 firearms. Yeah. So I know. So guys, like, put your there's a lot happening. So I've been trying to really put my mental health first. I have some I get a little anxiety sometimes, so I'm really trying to take care of that, and you all do that too. Okay, so be safe, take care of yourselves. You need extra time, you need anything at all, email me. We're going to make it through this class despite all of the craziness that's happening in the world. One more funny bit of news. Not that 2,000 guns being stolen is funny, but this really is the silver lining. Has anybody been following the Ram Ranch resistance stuff? This is amazing. If you haven't heard about this, yeah, the Ram Ranch resistance. Oh, we can bring up Ukraine and Russia, yeah, but the Ram Ranch resistance, yeah, people are trolling. People have infiltrated like Zello, and they're trolling the truckers with this gay cowboy song. I think it's like porno metal or something. Anyway, it's a song about a bunch of gay cowboys at the Ram Ranch, and they're trolling these Zello chats with this gay cowboy song, and I'm here for it. So it's fantastic. So yeah, good. And yeah, I'm seeing it on signs. Like there was a counter protest in Ottawa that I saw on the news. Yeah. A porno metal song. Yeah. I know, every time I read it, I think this is amazing. There's hope for the human race after all. And yeah, of course, there's a lot, so that's a bit of a silver lining. But there's also, Russia and Ukraine right now quite tense. And that, admittedly, I haven't been following that as closely as I should because it's farther from home. But like, what is this? I mean, typical Putin, right? Typical Putin. So I don't know, maybe some of you have connections to Russia or Ukraine. I mean, maybe some of you have some family over there. I have a friend who works for an NGO here in Ottawa who a few years ago, when they were holding the election that President Zelensky was elected at the end of, he was doing some NGO work over there for the election, making sure everything was safe and secure and that there was no interference going on, right? But yeah, Stefan, I think you called it, going for a new modern day invasion record. I mean, the United States still likes a good invasion too, but I mean, come on, it's Putin. Just, I guess, yeah, keep an eye on the news, but don't watch too much news because your mental health could suffer a little bit if you get you can become a little fatigued from this sort of thing. But hey, reading week is coming up, so hopefully we'll all get a chance to relax a little bit over reading week. You can go and listen to Ram Ranch, and listen to something heavy and rock out a bit. I know, and I always used to say, Ian, people would say to me, I don't watch the news, it's too depressing. And I would say, well, but think about the people that are in the news that are making you depressed, right? You can't watch the Russia-Ukraine situation. Well, what about the people in Ukraine that what if Russia invades? What about them, right? So I'm gonna I keep my eyes on the news, but I have to limit, like, I'm not going to reread several stories about the same thing over and over and over, day after day. Maybe I'll read one or two, to get different perspectives. But if you find yourself, if you find it's affecting your mood, then put the phone down, right? Yeah. Like, don't go on, like, stay off Twitter, limit your time on places like that, right? So where did we leave off? We were talking about scientific rationality. We had just finished we had just finished our discussion of Bentham and utilitarianism, and that's how how utilitarianism is kind of a almost like risk benefit analysis, a very economical theory of morality, or an ethical theory. Duzek on page 56 says of another strain which is similar to that, rational choice theorists. While rational choice theorists in the 20th century political science have modeled political and military strategies on an economic model of costs and benefits. Risk-benefit analysts evaluate the worthwhileness of technological projects by adding benefits and subtracting risks in a manner similar to Bentham's utilitarianism. And we'll talk about this. There's a whole section of this kind of at the end of the chapter, which I think we'll talk about next time. But Duzek fleshes this out in more detail there. He'll show examples. I think one of his examples has to do with the Ford Pinto, or was it the Pinto or the Nova? One of Ford's crappy cars. The cost of upgrading some of the safety features versus the amount of people that would die if they were not to make the car safer, right? Cost benefit analysis. Say you're going to go mine some heavy metals somewhere. How many people are going to die or become sick because of damage to the environment versus the money that you're going to make. If you're going to make enough money to pay the lawsuits, then who cares? Mine those heavy metals, right? That's what this risk-benefit analysis entails. And remember also that we spent a considerable amount of time last time talking about mathematics as a model of rationality, and that's how we got to Bentham, right? Remember, Bentham and later risk-benefit analysis is mathematical, right? We're literally talking about adding units of pleasure or subtracting units of pain for utilitarianism. Or if we're talking about risk-benefit analysis, we're talking about how much money we'll make versus how much money we might have to pay in damages for people that our product injures or kills, right? So that's all very mathematical. But another model of rationality is scientific rationality, right? Scientific rationality is, oh my goodness, I can't stop yawning. Scientific rationality is broader than mathematical rationality, because scientific rationality, while it incorporates mathematics, also incorporates observation and experimentation. These are not part of mathematics. Mathematics is too precise for this. But in science, because you're doing something that's fundamentally inductive, right? You're observing, so you need to use induction. Experimentation, you're trying to falsify things, trying to falsify your hypotheses. It's more complicated than mathematics. Less pure, but more complicated, you could say. You have to also guess, right? When you make a hypothesis, what are you doing? You're basically making a guess, an educated guess. And you have to use your judgment. You might have to apply principles of rationality, principles of naturalism, like parsimony. Maybe you have some result and you have two hypotheses that can explain it equally well. You need to apply another principle. You need to apply the principle of parsimony, for example, which is like Occam's razor, right? The simplest answer is the correct one, is how Occam's razor is. Oh, I can't stop yawning. Oh. The simplest answer is the correct answer. That's how Occam's razor is usually given in, everyday parlance. But what Occam's razor really says is do not multiply entities beyond necessity. What does that mean? Well, it means basically the simplest answer is the correct one. But entities, theoretical entities, right? You don't want to have to make up more stuff to explain what you saw. Can anyone give me an example? Say we have two competing theories or hypotheses that explain what we observe equally well. So that we've got to apply the principle of parsimony or Occam's razor. Can anyone think of one? I have one in case we can't, but I want to hear if anyone can come up with an example. Ghost blew out the candle. Well, that's a good example. Yeah, because if you say the ghost blew out the candle, well, now you have to explain the existence of ghosts, which is a big ask, But the wind, if you say the wind blew out the candle, well, no problem. There's wind. Wind, we understand wind. Wind is a natural phenomenon. No problem. Glass half full or half empty is more of a perspective thing, right? Or what does the engineer say? The engineer says the glass is twice as big as it needs to be. Zach, you nailed it. Heliocentric versus geocentric. Yeah, that's the one I was thinking of. So Copernicus, right? Kind of kicks off the scientific revolution in Europe. Prior to Copernicus, there was the geocentric model where the Earth is at the center of the solar system and everything goes around the Earth, right? And this is due to Ptolemy, all the way back in ancient Alexandria. That Ptolemy was kind of like a Greek Egyptian scientist. It was part of the ruling class of Egypt at the time, who were Greek, because Alexander the Great had conquered Greece, or conquered Egypt. So Ptolemy comes up with this theory where the Earth is at the center and everything goes around the Earth. But there's a problem. Planets, they wander. That's what the name means. Planetos, wanderer. They wander like in the sky. They go, on their way, but then they recede a bit. And they keep going, right? This is due to the way, this is due to the perspective that we have on the Earth. But at the time, they didn't know that. So they had to explain this. Well, maybe the planets aren't just orbiting, but they're also going on these epicycles, as Zach says. So it's wheels within wheels. Super complicated clockwork kind of depiction of the solar system to explain the retrograde motion of the planets, right? Along comes Copernicus, and he takes an idea that he might have got from an ancient Greek thinker named Aristarchus. Aristarchus thought, well, what if the sun is at the center of the Earth, of the solar system, and the Earth orbits around the sun, right? It's unclear whether Copernicus got this idea from him or whether he had independently thought of it. But Copernicus says, well, hang on, if we have a geocentric model, it explains what we observe just as well as if we have a heliocentric model, it explains what we observe just as well as the geocentric model. But we don't need all these epicycles, right? We can just have circular orbits. Now, here's the thing. Both models explained the data just as well. Neither explained them perfectly. Why? Well, because Copernicus thought that the orbits of planets are circular. It wasn't until Kepler and Brahe came along. Johannes Kepler was a mathematician, contemporary of Galileo, and Tycho Brahe was a wealthy nobleman who had a really awesome observatory. observatories back then didn't have telescopes. They weren't invented yet, but they were like big things with little holes in the wall. And go look it up. It's really fascinating. Anyway, it wasn't until Kepler took Tycho Brahe's observations and realized the planets were moving in ellipses that we knew for sure the geocentric model was correct. Also, then, Galileo, when he invented the telescope, he was actually able to look at the moons of Jupiter and go, look, stuff isn't orbiting the Earth. Look at the moons of Jupiter. They're orbiting Jupiter, not the Earth. Haha, take that. Yeah, exactly. Zach, you're right. Yeah. So Copernicus's idea was simpler. So logic sort of dictated that we should go with that one. But it still needed some refining. And that was thanks to Kepler and Brahe. Now, of course, there are no epicycles at all. And all of us learn in school that planets orbit the sun in ellipses. And that's, Galileo spent his life under house arrest because he wouldn't recant his findings. So he had to live under house arrest. Could have been worse. I mean, could have gone the way of Giordano Bruno. Giordano Bruno was a bit of a crank, but he did believe that there was life on other planets, and he wouldn't recant. And he was burned at the stake. So yeah, I guess it could have been worse for Galileo. And yeah, he was at home, but he wrote a lot of letters. He corresponded with Rene Descartes. He was visited by Thomas Hobbes, the English natural philosopher and political scientist. And he is one of the giants upon which modern scientists stand, right? When Galileo, or when Isaac Newton wrote "We see far because we stand on the shoulders of giants," he's talking about Kepler, Galileo, Brahe, Copernicus. That's who he's talking about. So that's good. Good discussion. Yeah, that's an example of why we might have to use not only a bit of guesswork and judgment. You have to come up with ideas in science. Science is amazing the way it works this way. You come up with a guess, you test it, you tweak your model, and you're never going to get to the way nature actually is. But the idea is to try and get close enough. Yeah, that's true. Pope Urban had been one of his biggest supporters. I remember that from my astronomy class. But yeah, Galileo, he would not recant his beliefs. The Bible tells you how to go to heaven, not how the heavens go. That's often attributed to Galileo. I don't know whether he actually said that, but you get the gist of it. Okay, let's go on. Juza continues, nevertheless, many philosophers of science, inductive logicians, and logical positivists during the 19th and much of the 20th centuries pursued a mechanical version of the scientific method and an algorithm for automatically and exactly computing the probabilities of scientific theories. This was the ideal of Rudolf Carnap's work in formal inductive logic. All but a very few philosophers of science by the later decades of the 20th century concluded from the failure of this enterprise that this was an illusory goal and that the scientific method cannot be made mechanical and algorithmic. And that's why in the 20th century, a lot of thinkers have embraced models of rationality that include judgment, because we cannot do science. Basically, what's being said here is that we can't make science exactly like math or logic. It just doesn't work that way, right? Science involves too much judgment, too much guesswork to be made as algorithmic and precise as math or logic. So we need to include judgment. So what's judgment? Let's talk about that. Judgment, Juzik says on pages 56 and 57, involves the sizing up of a situation, assessment of evidence, and deciding on a path of action without following rules. That's the key. Aristotle, in his Ethics, emphasized the role of judgment. Immanuel Kant, especially in his third critique, the Critique of Judgment, also emphasized the role of the power of judgment and claimed that judgment is not characterizable by rules. if there were rules for judgments, there would have to be rules for the application of judgment and rules for those rules ad infinitum or to infinity. So, Aristotle emphasizes the role of judgment in the ethics because, judgment is important. There's no rule. It's just you get better at this. It's practice, right? It's like making good judgments is like a skill for Aristotle, and particularly he's talking about moral and ethical judgments here. Moral judgments, what is right and wrong. Mostly ethical, because it's the Nicomachean ethics. Ethics is, how to live the good life. So how to be a good person, right? You need to use your judgment, and you get better at doing this with practice. As Kant said in his third critique, we're looking at an infinite regress here. If judgment is characterizable by rules, it can't be characterizable by rules. But just because judgments are not characterizable by rules, it doesn't mean that they're not reasonable. Think about it. We make judgments in law. Judges, it's right there in their name. That's their job, to make judgments. Or I guess here we call them justices of the peace, but they're judges, right? Medicine, you got to make a judgment, right? Medicine is not an exact science. Sometimes doctors make the wrong call, right? They make mistakes. That's why there's malpractice insurance. So judgments in those areas are considered reasonable. And in science and technology, even though there's a lot of guesswork and judgment and hypothesizing and tinkering, we consider these reasonable too, even though they don't quite fit with the mathematical picture of reasoning that we learned about when we began this chapter. Now, during the 20th century, a particular kind of reasoning has sort of won this widespread favor, and that's instrumental reason or instrumental rationality. Duzic says, instrumental rationality is means end rationality. It involves the search for the most efficient means to reach a given end. Instrumental rationality and the search for efficiency are rightly identified with the technological approach. In parentheses, Ellul's technique, with its emphasis on efficiency and the search for efficient means, strongly resembles Weber's instrumental rationality. And that's what we talked about last time. So instrumental reason also has close ties with Comte, because, if you recall, he associated science with prediction, not explanation. Prediction can work because what science is really doing, according to Comte, is identifying causal laws in nature, right? Think of Newton's laws of motion. These are causal laws. Kepler's laws of planetary motion, Galileo's laws about, momentum, inertia, all that stuff, right? These are causal laws, and because we have these laws, we can make predictions. So instrumental reasoning depends upon this kind of thing, causal consequences of actions which are known through science. And as Duzic puts it, often this has a sort of if-then structure. If-then, like production rules in a computer program. We call these production rules, or if sometimes even if-then rules, right? Where if condition X obtains, then action Y must be carried out, right? Let's pretend you're a robot. Your robot might have simple rules like if a green cube is within the visual field, approach the green cube, right? So maybe the robot randomly wanders around a room of different colored geometric shapes. And once a green cube is within its field of view, it approaches it. Then it has another rule in its program. If close enough to green cube, pick it up. So once the robot is close enough, then a new routine takes over and its robot arms come out and it picks up the green cube. And then maybe it moves it somewhere. It depends on what its program tells it to do, right? So this means end mirrors cause and effect. If then, this production rule. So yeah, this is why instrumental reasoning works, right? We can identify these causal patterns in nature through science, or even, what's a really simple example would be a thermostat. I use this in my cognitive science class, which I haven't taught in a while, but this is a good one. An analog thermostat is probably even a better example than a digital one because well, I'll explain. So you have your thermostat, right? It's on the wall, connected to your furnace. And an analog thermostat will have some kind of like metal coil, which changes, it expands and contracts. So the coil changes depending on the temperature. But you can set it to turn on if a certain temperature is obtained, right? So you set it, say, if the temperature is below 25 degrees Celsius, turn the heat on. So that's the if-then structure. It's very simple. If condition X obtains, action Y must be implemented. But this if-then structure mirrors cause and effect, because the cause and effect part has to do with the actual physical implementation of the thermostat, right? Cold temperatures cause metal to contract. Warmer temperatures heat the metal up and cause it to expand, which changes the shape of the coil, which, depending on how the thermostat is set, will activate the furnace, right? So you can see there how the if-then structure mirrors cause and effect. And instrumental rationality is all about, if-then reasoning. So Duzek continues, one feature of instrumental rationality is that, although it focuses on fitting means to ends or finding efficient means to reach given goals, it does not evaluate the ends of themselves. Just like your thermostat doesn't care how warm or cold it ought to be in your apartment. It just does what you tell it, right? In means-end reasoning, the ends are actually seen as a-rational, not irrational, a-rational. And this is kind of tied to this idea that I guess comes from Weber, is that we can't reason about values because values are subjective. I don't know if I agree with that. Well, values are subjective, sure. Does that mean we can't reason about them? No, I don't think that's the case. And I say that because I just finished teaching a class on the emotions, which are, according to many theorists, what enable us to reason about values. Emotions are kind of about values indirectly. So yeah, I do think that we can reason about values. So I don't think that they're not rational. They are subjective, yes. They're subjective in the sense that what I value might be different from what you value, right? But we can still reason about them. Anyway, Duzek continues. He says this viewpoint, that the ends are a-rational and that we can't reason about values. This viewpoint, popular in our culture, was given classic formulation early in the 20th century by Max Weber. According to Weber, Western culture is being rationalized. Remember, rationalization. More and more areas of traditional thought and action are being structured by instrumental reason. However, the goals or values about which the means are rationally structured are based on irrational decision. There can be no genuine reasoning about values. I disagree. I would be one of these critics. It's possible to reason about values. Plato and Aristotle would certainly say, of course you can reason about values. That's all Plato does in a lot of the dialogues. He has Socrates talking about, like some rando is like, hey, Socrates, I was just thinking, what is justice? And, Socrates will say, I don't know. Let's talk about it for 3 hours. Like, I mean, come on. That's all Plato talks about in a lot of his dialogues. And Aristotle too. Aristotle is like super reasonable when talking about values. Super reasonable. Go read the Nicomachean Ethics. Go read the Politics. You'll see what I mean. He's super reasonable about values. Vicente, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I've read Weber, and what I believe he says, I'm gonna try to oppose to what Disick is saying, because what I believe Weber says is that in real life, like in everyday interactions, we do mix these kind of things, but for like sociological analysis, you have to separate them and put them in these boxes that are not real, they don't exist in reality, but you use them to analyze these actions.
Okay, so if I understand what you're saying, Weber would grant that, oh, sure, in everyday conversation we can talk reasonably about values, but if we're trying to do a science about values, that's what he thought we couldn't
Exactly.
do. Yeah,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
That makes sense. I still think I disagree with I would still disagree, but that's okay. Guessing at Weber, Tess says, perhaps it's something like, sure, you can reason from your values, but you can't reason your way into having particular values. Oh, yeah, okay, yeah. And I guess that, like Vicente said, that's maybe why it's possible to have that everyday discourse that Vicente mentioned, that Weber granted was possible about values. I mean, think about it. Like, what if we're all talking about something that we like? Like what if we were to all share what our favorite kinds of music were, or our favorite food, right? We'd all probably have different answers, and we'd all be able to explain our answers, like, I like pizza. Why? Well, pizza's really good. I like the taste of all the ingredients. I like to make it. I like to order it. I think it looks good. You can give all kinds of reasons for your values, right? Or someone could say, like, oh, I don't like pizza. Why not? Well, maybe I'm a vegetarian, and I can't get a good vegetarian pizza around here, right? So, we can do this, right? I would still disagree that we can't talk about it, maybe not scientifically, but philosophically, we certainly can reason about values in a systematic, almost scientific-like sort of way. And heck, if you grant that something like moral psychology is a science, then yeah, I mean, I think, yeah, I think I disagree with Weber. I think I'm more on the side of Plato and Aristotle here, but anyway. John Dewey also, Disick notes here, with a very different approach, the American pragmatist John Dewey would claim that we can reason about values, but his own mode of reasoning is itself means and reasoning. Ends do justify the means, but not every end is sufficient to justify its means. Ends and means must be fitted to one another. I mean, I guess I'm seeing a sort of superficial similarity with Aristotle there. You need to be able to choose the best end, and you need to have the wisdom to work out the best way of getting there, right? That's why you develop your practical wisdom, your phronesis. The idea is to become a phronimos, someone who has practical wisdom, somebody who somebody who can do means and reasoning, but who can also question the fundamentals of like, should I be doing this? Should I be aiming for that end and not that one? Right? That's practical reasoning. Yeah, right. Imagine you're in Weimar, Germany, and you've got a bad economy, right? You've got the reparations required by the Treaty of Versailles. You've got the Great Depression. Germany's not doing too good. The economy is pretty bad. You want to fix the economy. So you got a couple options, right? Socialism is very big right now. Maybe we could be communist, like the Russians. Maybe we could be capitalist, like the Americans. They're doing okay. They did all right through the crash. of 29. I mean, their economy did recover faster than Germany's. Or maybe we could be National Socialists, right? That's what happened, and that didn't turn out too well. But yeah, like that would not be a good end. I mean, think about it. Nazism is the final solution that Hitler had implemented. The final solution, the Holocaust. That's very instrumental. Think about it. But it's not like we can claim that the ends weren't questioned, right? It's not that nobody asked whether it was the right thing to do to eliminate all the Jews in Europe. No, Hitler and the Nazis believed that was the right thing to do. So that's an important thing to keep in mind, is that but yeah, but Jonah, okay, so that is a good point. A suicidal brain parasite, it does bypass logic. All ideologies kind of do this, but Nazis particularly bad, because Nazism, it is not a type of socialism. It is more in line with authoritarian fascism. Often it's called fascism, but it's not really fascism. Yeah, I guess you could say a subset of fascism. It was inspired by fascism. Fascism was what was happening in Italy. It was the fascist party, Mussolini. Hitler kind of does his own thing with that, right? I would say it is more extreme. It is cynical and magical, although the technological cynical elements, I think, won out. Overall, okay, this is difficult, because overall, from the leadership, right? From Hitler, from Goering, Goebbels, Himmler, the guy leading up the Wannsee conference that I mentioned last time was Reinhard Heydrich, the butcher of Prague. These were evil people. His assistant, Adolf Eichmann, ran away to South America and was captured by the Mossad and brought to Israel for trial. And Hannah Arendt described this guy as just banal, right? The banality of evil. This guy was evil, but he looked like some kind of pencil pusher, not an evil genius. What the heck? Literally has the theory that Germans couldn't have good orgasms because they were too rational. Interesting. I've never heard that. But there's those people who, the point I'm trying to make is that it's not like the end was never questioned. No, there was an end. But then there were other people like who I think turned a blind eye to what was happening. People like Albert Speer. Maybe people like Werner von Braun, right? That knew they were complicit. They weren't the initiators of the evil actions, but they were complicit in them and perpetuated them by being complicit in them. So yeah, it's not like this is just instrumental reason run amok with the Nazis. Let's continue. Against the what time is it? 12:34. Okay. Against the positivist claim, Duzick says that scientific, predictive, and possibly causal reasoning is the only form of legitimate reasoning and meaningful discourse, some critics of instrumental rationality would appeal to traditional metaphysical reasoning. This higher form of reasoning has been characterized in various ways, though these ways are related. Plato claimed that although mathematical reasoning from assumptions or axioms was the training for philosophical rulers, mathematical reasoning was lower than dialectical reasoning that questioned the fundamental assumptions. Dialectical reasoning examined the forms of values and justice, right? So there's higher forms of reasonings that exist. And these higher forms, for example, philosophical dialectic, are supposed to help us question the fundamentals of lower forms of reasoning. And just, not to keep harping on about Nazism, but this is why ideology can be dangerous, is because, ideology isn't exactly a higher form of reasoning. If you have an ideology like Nazism or fascism, the idea is that you are just committed to that is your fundamental, those are your fundamental principles, and you don't question them, right? And people say this all the time. How on earth did this happen? How on earth did this happen in Germany? Like, Germany gave us not the country, but the people, the language and culture. I mean, Beethoven, Kant. Like, it's not like this was an unreasonable society. How did this happen? And this was a major question in the 20th century following the Second World War. It happened in philosophy, and it even happened in psychology, trying to explain how this could have happened. Like, how could we have been so evil, right? And I think a big part of it is the big part of the answer. And this is the answer that you'll get if you ask a philosopher is probably ideology. A psychologist might tell you something else. Ask Stanley Milgram or somebody, right? Anyway, let's get on with it. My computer's going slow again. Oh, goodness. Come on. Oh, there we go. Technology. So this whole idea, we see it in Plato, first of all, this idea that you need something like philosophy to question your fundamental assumptions. That's what philosophy is to this very day, is asking fundamental questions, right? So Plato says, like, okay, you need to train yourself in reason with math, but the higher form of reasoning is philosophy, which even allows you to question, even the fundamentals of math, like, what is a triangle? What is justice? Luckily, there are forms for all of these things, argued Plato, right? And we could grasp the true nature of the forms with the intellect, and no problem, right? But thousands have a similar idea coming out of thinkers like Kant and Hegel. We've got Kant, Hegel, a couple of other German philosophers, making contrast between contrasting reason and understanding, right? Kant said that understanding includes common sense reasoning and scientific reasoning about, entities or beings, things that exist, causes, effects, so on. So understanding can include common sense reasoning. What should I do today? Should I write a philosophy paper? Should I go for a walk around Königsberg? Right? What should I do? It's a myth, by the way, that Kant never traveled more than 10 miles away from his hometown of Königsberg. That is a myth. He did, in fact, travel. Not very often, but he did. So the reasoning about that, reasoning about science, it's all understanding for Kant. And also for Kant, there are appearances and there are things in themselves, phenomena and noumena. We can understand phenomena because, the mind imposes a sort of structure on the world. This is thanks to forms of sensible intuition. These include space and time and categories of understanding. There are 12 of those. It's split into, like, I think 4 or 5 categories. I'm not going to get into that because Kant is like a whole thing. Kant's is complicated. But the forms of intuition, space and time, this is something that is pretty cool. If you don't know this, Kant does not think of space and time as part of the world. Space and time are forms of intuition that the mind uses to, I guess, like, impose order on the world, to make the world make sense to the mind. So space and time are not out there. Space and time are in here. And because the mind can impose a structure on the world via the forms of intuition and the categories of understanding, we can understand phenomena, things as they appear to us, right? We cannot understand noumena the same way, the things in themselves, right? And this has some interesting implications for things like the soul or for God, free will, which Kant says that we can't really reason about very effectively, right? Because think about it. God, for example, is supposed to, God's supposed to transcend space and time. But we impose space and time on the world to make it make sense. If God is beyond space and time, we can't understand it, right? Everybody following me? I know Kant is a bit weird if you're not familiar with him, but I just like to make sure everybody knows what I'm saying. By the way, I'm no expert on Kant. I'm not, but this stuff right here is important in the history of philosophy. This is Kant's Copernican revolution in metaphysics, right? All right, simpler question. Who is fairly confident that they do not understand what Kant was talking about? Maxine. Okay. Stefan, no problem. So think of Plato's cave, okay? Remember Plato's cave? We've got prisoners in the cave and they're imprisoned. And they have a fire behind them and there's shadows being cast on the wall in front of them. And they think that those shadows are real. But those shadows are mere appearances, phenomena. They're not real. They're just appearances. Kant thinks of the world that we experience as a world of phenomena, right? This cup, when I look, it's like indirect realism, right? So I look at this cup and I'm like, okay, that cup is kind of a bluish gray. It has a letter J. It's filled with coffee, which smells nice, but is getting cold. So what does the cup look like? Well, my mind imposes on the things in themselves in the world a structure via space and time, right? My cup exists in space and through time. But that's my mind imposing that on the world, or rather space and time are like a filter, and the world comes into the mind and is organized in terms of space and time. Yeah, the noumena is like the stuff outside of the cave, is what Plato would say. The things in themselves, like the sun. The sun is like the form of the good. You can't look at the pure forms. Like you can't stare at the sun. You can't. You're like, it's too bright, right? So Kant is saying that there are things in themselves, but we can't know anything about them because you need a mind to know anything about anything. And there are things the mind does with the world, right? Such that, when I look at this cup, it's like if I were to ask, some people ask, what does this cup really look like, right? It's indirect realism, really, is kind of a, well, no, it's really transcendental idealism, but like, think of it like this. Like I'm looking at this cup, right? And I see it as like bluish gray with the letter J on it. Like why is that? Well, it's because there's light shining off of it and certain wavelengths of light come into my eyes and go into my brain, and my brain constructs an image, an appearance. Does it make any sense to say, well, what does the cup really look like? Well, I mean, for me, that's kind of a nonsensical question, because the cup doesn't look like anything without a mind to perceive it, because the mind is what uses these forms of intuition and categories of understanding to make the phenomena of the cup, to understand the cup. So we can understand phenomena, right? Because that's what the mind does. The mind is like a phenomena generator. It has forms of intuition and categories of understanding, and it takes the world and gives us a representation of it, an appearance. What does the real thing look like? What about the thing in itself? What do you mean? Kant would say there is no way to understand that, because the mind cannot grasp things in themselves, the pure things as they are, because the mind is always doing something to the world as it represents the world to us. Does that make sense? I don't know if that makes sense. If you're still confused, let me know. Okay, Julian says it makes sense. Stefan, I guess so, yeah. I mean, it's tricky, but you got it it's like, the mind represents the world to you. When I look at this cup, I'm not seeing the actual cup, right? Well, this is perception. This is part of perception and also understanding for Kant. That's how it relates. This is how perception and understanding work, right? Like when I look at this cup, I'm not looking at the cup. This is a mental representation of a cup that I'm seeing. It's phenomena. What's the cup really like? That's nonsense. It doesn't make sense to ask that, because things only look like things if there are perceivers looking at them, if there's a mind looking at them, right? I know this is really weird, but it's also pretty cool if you think about it. Anyway, Kant says there are certain antimonies of reasoning. Oh, good. Okay, that's good, Julian. But yeah, they're like antimonies of reasoning, right? The soul, God, free will. They're like barriers. There are things that we can't reason about because, we can't reason about noumena. We can only reason about phenomena. And some noumena sort of transcend the forms of sensible intuition and the categories of understanding, and we just can't make sense of them. We can't understand them. Something like God, the soul, free will. These are all those things for Kant. Although Kant kind of kicks, this is the way my philosophy professor put it in my undergrad, he kicks God out the front door and lets him in the back. He's like, oh, we can't reason about God. We can't. Transcend space and time. Can't reason about him. Oh, but God is necessary though to explain everything though. So yeah, let's let it back in. That's Kant. That's what Kant does, kind of. Let's move on. Don't want to talk too much about Kant because then we got Hegel. Well, kind of, yeah. Essence, I would say pure essence, pure form, true being, ultimate reality. These are all terms that kind of mean things in themselves, the true things, right? I suppose you could do that, albeit carefully. Do it carefully. Yeah. You wouldn't be able to actually talk about it. You can say that it's there. What is the noumena? What is this noumena? Well, I know that there is a cup in the world. There is an actual real cup, but it doesn't make any sense for me to talk about it because all I'm getting is the phenomena. I can't reason about the noumena. I can only reason about what the mind gives me to reason about, and that's phenomena. Really cool stuff. If you have questions about Kant, and you happen to have a class with Professor Andrew Brooke, I mean, I don't think he teaches too many more classes these days, but he's the Kant guy. You gotta ask him. He's the guy. Okay. So, okay. Finally, Hegel. Aufheben. We're back to Aufheben. So Hegel gave the dialectic of theoretical reason a more positive role. The contradictions that reason reaches lead to new formulations that surpass and synthesize the opposing notions that had contradicted one another. For this process, Hegel used a German term, aufheben, that means both to abolish and to raise to a new level. Sometimes the Latinized term sublation is used for it, from the past participle of the verb tollo, to lift. In case you were interested in that. I don't know. I wasn't. I want to learn more German. I don't really care about Latin. I want to learn more German because, wouldn't it be cool to read Hegel and Kant in German? It would be tricky, but I think it'd be fun and rewarding. Anyway, in contrast to Kant's contradictions of reason, which act as barriers, Hegel's contradictions are the motor that drives reason onward. Though a bit inaccurate, Hegel's dialectic is generally portrayed as starting with a thesis, that's an idea or position, it being countered by an antithesis, an opposing opposite idea, and the two both being absorbed and transcended in a synthesis that incorporates the best of each and at the same time raises their fusion to a higher level. And we talked about this before, right? Let's go back to the example of the geocentric versus the heliocentric solar system, right? Thesis, geocentric solar system. Antithesis, heliocentric solar system. Now, if this is Ptolemy's model and this is Copernicus's model, neither of them are what we ended up with, but one kind of superseded the other. And then it was further superseded when Kepler came along and said, wait a minute, planets don't orbit the sun in circles, they orbit in ellipses, right? So, it's like you have an idea, you have something that contradicts it, and in negating it and preserving the good bits and improving it, you reach something new and raise it up to a higher level, right? This is the kind of historical dialectic that Hegel's always on about, right? He thought that reason was literally unfolding through history in this way. The world spirit or Weltgeist of reason was sort of flowing through history, making history happen. He's lecturing and Napoleon's coming and he's like, look, that's what I'm talking about. There's Napoleon coming to aufheben the crap out of all of us, right? So yeah, that's fun. Good old Hegel, man. Hegel. I wish I'd read more Hegel when I was an undergraduate. Heck, I wish I'd read more Kant when I was an undergraduate. I got a copy of the Critique of Pure Reason over here, though, that I think I might take a little look through again, just for funsies. But that's all I have for today. It's 12:52, so I think it's fine if we finish up now. I know that was a little shorter than usual, thanks in part to my rant about all the current events. But keep all these ideas in mind, reason. You could have a whole class, a whole course on reason itself, I think, if you wanted to. So, it's going to take us a little bit to get through this chapter, but I think that we can finish it up next time, and that's what we'll try to do. And then, of course, it's reading week. So that'll be fun. I think everybody's looking forward to that too. So let's shut this lecture down for now. And remember, if anybody has any questions, let me know. Otherwise, take care, stay safe, and I'll see you all on Thursday for our next class. Vicente, go ahead.
Yeah, I was waiting for the class to finish to ask about my paper. I don't know if you mind me doing here.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, go ahead. You can ask me your question. Okay.
So what I want to ask is that I'm taking two different authors that are not mentioned in this book. Is that like way off topic, or is it okay if it's still, I'm talking about the possibility of rationals, of social systems being rational or not?
Yeah, I think that would be fine. Whether it's for a reading response or for the final paper, you can talk about thinkers that we don't talk about directly here. And as long as you can explain why it's still philosophy of technology, then I'm absolutely on board with that. I'm fine with that.
Cool. Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. All right. So if that's everything, I think that I'll shut her down for the day. So thanks, everybody. Stay safe out there. If you have any questions about any of the material or anything like that, let me know. And in the meantime, I'll get to work on grading your responses and get that feedback back to you. So Cheers, everyone. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. That's the plan. Got to make more coffee. Cold coffee. I don't even know why iced coffee is a thing. It's weird. To me, anyway, it's weird. All right. Thanks, everybody. And I'll see you next time. Bye for now.